So Steve, you and I, we finally had an opportunity to fly together. It had been a while. We went to Atlanta and then I went to New York City, but both times we talked a little bit about communication skills at both. And so it was fun to have you in the first one, but you pulled out a tool that I'd never used before with the app of the buzzer.
Oh yeah.
It was so much fun.
That was fun.
It was.
Well, I all of a sudden I wanted a buzzer for this exercise. And I'm like, is there a buzzer anywhere? And they had like 4 of them in the office and all of them were dead batteries.
They were dead. I know. So you found this app. And it was just called Buzzer.
I think it was just called Buzzer.
And it was just a red button. So there's this one exercise. I just wanted to talk about it for a minute because it was so funny to me. But then also you weren't with me when I went to New York. And I had this one just hysterical moment where I was observing this thing. So we have this one exercise. We talk about all different kind of communication skills. But the one that was hysterical to me was when we were talking about connectors or fillers, which you and I both agree are so hard to get rid of. The uhs, the ums, but the kind of the likes, you knows, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So where we used the app for the buzzer was this group in Atlanta. We put them in pairs and they just had to try to talk about something. And every time that they said a filler, they had right. What did Christian say? Didn't he say that like he never felt more humiliated in his whole life? It was
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah, because I think they were in 3s, and so you got buzzed by 2 people.
You did. You're right. It was like 2. It was so much fun. I had never used that buzzer app before, so it was a great add-on.
That was good. I did get nervous for a sec because when we said you're going to get buzzed every time you do a filler, some people started getting angry.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is a fun exercise.
They're like,
and they were not up for it. I think I'm enough of a people pleaser in those moments. I start to rethink everything. Well, then never mind. We won't do it. Like, no, we're doing the buzzer.
They needed it and had fun with it, even though it was a bit hard. However, when I flew to New York and I was working with communication skills, it was too big of a group. I noticed that not everyone had an Apple, so I chose not to do it. But I wanted to just tell you that they had to just say stop, things like that. I put them in groups of 2. And when we debriefed after the exercise, they had to talk about just a trip they had taken and try not to use a filler. Steve, we finished debriefing and there wasn't a single person who made it through any of them. And they could not believe how much of their life was filled with a filler.
Yeah. I want to say
unreal. Their biggest takeaway was, I want to work on this so much.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk about it because it was such an interesting aha.
If you want to work on it, get on a podcast, get on YouTube and watch yourself over and over, fail and sound terrible.
You're like, I haven't worked. I know.
It's funny to me how I will be in here and we'll record something and I'll feel like, wow, that was so great. And I said that so clear and concise. And then I listen back later. Oh
gosh,
I'm so slow.
Yeah.
I have so many kindas and likes. And
me too.
What feels like an instant for me of thinking feels like an eternity when you're watching it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're not alone. It is a hard, and it's not fair because I started training on the losing the fillers. I am 51 and I started at 27.
Yeah. You still haven't figured it out, huh?
It was hysterical. But I also love that they were working so hard at it.
So my shout out today, this is so fun. We had a message come through from the husband of someone who started coaching with us.
Husband, okay.
And so the husband, Billy, sent a message with a screenshot where he kind of like, he blurred out the other texts from his wife and he left the part that said, my wife after one session with Greenhouse, worth every penny. Like all caps from his wife, worth, period, every period, penny. And I love.
When that comes from the partner, that's really significant.
No, it was the wife said it, texted it to the husband. The husband sent it
to us. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it was cool because
so great.
She didn't tell us that, but he was like,
I gotta share.
Yeah.
It was great.
Do you have
I do.
Okay.
Actually, personality. I think it's come to my attention that I have mentioned way too many times my very favorite assessment, and I just wanted to give our listeners an opportunity to know what it was and to take it if they were interested.
Okay.
So if you've heard me say way too many times, there's this personality assessment out there called Insights Discovery, and I'm not going to go into it.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want it. There'll be a link.
We always do that because we're bored of ourselves. we hear
are.
ourselves say the same thing over and over, but then, yeah, I'll get that too. Sometimes a friend who listens to the podcast will be like,
they're like, could you tell me more,
please? Could you tell me more, please?
Yeah. So it costs $110 to take. It is like a 27-page report. Every group, I just did it with this group out in New York, this tech group. Interesting that they said it was their very favorite they've ever taken. It always happens because the dynamic of it is that it's not just about your self-awareness. The takeaway is that it's 4 colors. You'll find out your top 2, and it's really mostly about your communication style.
And let me say, because people will say like DISC or what are all the Personalysis is one I use. They all have the same colors, but this one, the colors mean something a little different.
Yeah, they do.
So just because you did DISC doesn't mean you already know your colors for this one.
And it's very memorable, and it really shows you how you show up, but how you show up to others, and how you need to shift a little bit of how you could show up better for either your team or for your clients.
I agree with you. It was interesting because you've always been mainly into Myers-Briggs.
I have.
And when you discovered this one, you instantly fell in love.
I did.
And it's like, I haven't even heard you talk about Myers-Briggs
I know,
since.
except for the extrovert introvert part.
But
I still love that.
My take has been, it's because it is a really fun assessment.
Yeah.
Whereas some of them can be really heavy or introspective or like, well, here's what I'm screwing up on again. Like, this is all my failures. I think there's something about Insights Discovery that's actually more fun.
The other thing that stands out to me is that it's a reminder to us that we develop the way that we live our lives from every single story of our life. The street we lived on, the town we were in, the parents we had, develop all of our perceptions. And then we assume that all of those perceptions is how everyone else sees the world. And this is such a reminder that, oh my gosh, they not only don't see it's vastly different. So because you see it so differently, how do I better adjust myself?
It's such a good point, because when you say we all have different ways we see the world, I think most people are like, yeah, I know. But they're thinking about big, like politics, global, like perspectives around culture and race. But what happens in coaching is it's all the tiny stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what actually makes things either dysfunctional or really good, is these tiny little, like the way that you and I experienced the last sentence you said can be very different because of those perspectives.
Goodness. Yeah.
And then we think we're on the same page and we're not.
Yep.
Or, misunderstand each other.
And there's this team out in DC who I did it with, and they have done it with their entire company. And when new hires come on now, it is part of their company culture. So they now feel like they have common language. And I love it. They're like feeling a little red, or I'm so sorry, I got to work on my yellow. It's like a cultural language thing now too. And I love that.
Or like the great example for teams is what dictates, what constitutes success to you.
Yeah.
In your perspective, what's your perspective of this meeting was successful?
Oh my goodness.
On the way out of a meeting. And yeah, it's all across the board. Each of those colors vastly different.
Feels so differently.
So one color, they're like, this was a great meeting because we all connected socially, emotionally. The other person who needs like a plan of action, they're like, this was a terrible meeting. We have no plans.
Yeah. So we'll have the link if anyone's interested in taking it. Of course, if you want to unpack it, I'm here for you.
So today I'm interviewing Rasheeda Creighton, and she has been a friend for a while. We've actually crossed paths for a long while. We both went to University of Michigan, but not at the same time. We both worked at Capital One, but didn't really overlap. And so we feel like we've been friends for decades, but we've actually only really been friends for a few years. But every time we talk, there's just so much to talk about. So I'm really excited for her to be on, and we'll dig into some of the things that she works on. So she's the executive director of the Jackson Ward Collective Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia, and they do a whole bunch of cool things really to help the ecosystem of Black entrepreneurs thrive and really help people like be successful in their businesses, whether that's the idea or getting started or growing something that they have or growing the whole community, the ecosystem. But she's also on some boards. She does her own coaching and teaching on personal finance and budgeting. People love working with her on that. And she has other things going on, like this thing called Paddleboard Ventures. I'll let her speak to the stuff she has going on. But let's dive in because we have a lot to talk about, and we'll probably have her come back on again. So tell me how the Blackstreet conference went, because we haven't talked since it happened. I was hoping to be there and I couldn't be there, but
it was amazing.
Yeah.
This year was a conference of like, we had these dreams of what it would look like, and what it became was nothing I expected and everything it needed to be. And so like Murphy's Law was in effect. Like people couldn't fly in.
Of course.
Flights got canceled. Like, I mean, all the things. I was like, oh my God.
Wait, how many times have you guys done it? Is this
is the second one.
The second?
This is the second one. So we're gearing up for the third one now. But the topics were so good. Like the most popular one was a Web3 one that we kind of we were like, oh, we should do something techie.
Yeah.
And they turned it into a lot around like AI and blockchain and chat GPT. And Tina Bonner came and was one of the panelists, and she gave people like, this is exactly how you use chat GPT. This is exactly how you script it.
Yeah.
If you can't yet afford to hire X type of role, like this is what you do. And folks were like, oh my God, like mind blown.
Yeah.
What was another? Generational wealth, like creating generational wealth. So we had Garnisha Ezadaro, who's the executive director. I always mess up her title, but I think it's executive director of the Greenwood Initiative, which is about creating generational wealth under Bloomberg Foundation.
Okay.
And then we had Sigmund Collins, who's an estate attorney locally, and we had them talking about like, we talk about using entrepreneurship as a way to create generational wealth, but practically speaking, what do you need to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need to put in place?
Right.
So those were some popular ones. What was the other really, really popular one? Lessons from the Trenches.
Okay.
So we have Rita Ricks, moderated, local entrepreneur, been entrepreneur for like 30-something years. We brought in Panama Jackson. So he and another guy, Damon Young, had started a blog. This is how old this is, right? A blog called Very Smart Brothers. It got bought by the Griot.
Okay.
Or the Root, one or the other. I think it was bought by the Root and then went to the Griot. Some kind of, anyway, sold it. Like this was just a thing they were doing, and they created this huge following. And he talks about like all the lessons he learned in that process. And then Lauren Powers is out of Atlanta, and she is a serial entrepreneur. She's owned a gym. And she talked about how she was terrible at owning a gym. And like the numbers looked good, but they weren't really making any money and all of those things. And so people just appreciate the transparency.
Yeah. What was your favorite? Did you have a favorite?
I have a favorite moment.
Okay.
Because I can't sit still during the conference. And so I pop in and out of session so I don't see a whole session.
Yeah.
But my favorite moment was with our keynote, Angel Gregoria. So Angel is the founder of the Spice Suite out of DC. She creates these spice blends. And then she just built out of using containers this whole market called Black and Forth in DC. And she's on stage, and it's the Q&A portion. And one of our panelists, who a lot of our speakers stayed, asked a question. And Gabby Goodwin is 16 years old. She is the founder of Gabby Bows. So she, those little bows that go on the ends of little kids' hair, little girls' hairs, and they always fall off. Well, she has created these bows that are patented that do not come off.
Yeah.
And I am a customer, and I can attest to this. I've had them since my youngest was 2. We have the same set of bows that we purchased when she was 2.
Yeah.
And so Gabby was one of our speakers, and she asked a question, and she introduced herself, and Angel goes, "Wait, Gabby, do you own Gabby Bows?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I buy those in Target for my daughter."
Yeah.
And like I teared up.
Yeah.
It was just such a moment
cool.
of like this connection that you don't see all the time and you don't feel all the time. But we've put all of the recordings. We did something different this year. So we put them all on SoundCloud. So if you go to SoundCloud and look up JWC Foundation, all of the sessions are recorded on audio and anybody can access them. So we put them out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm going to check them out there.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Thank you.
It's like events. I'm so bad at events. They're so intimidating to me. I'm always impressed with not just like pulling it off, but when it feels like people actually connected and
we've got such an amazing team.
Yeah.
We have such an amazing
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, before we get too much further, because there's so much for us to talk about, tell me, like we always talk about with our guests, what was your very first job?
You're going to laugh when you find out.
Okay. I have no idea.
Okay. So my first job was when I was 12.
Okay.
It's called Rasheeda's Clerical Services.
Yes, of course. Okay.
My father is now retired, but my father's a CPA.
Okay.
And I'm now dating myself completely because I've already told you I was 12 when this happened. But there was no tax software. You typed tax returns on a typewriter.
Uh-huh.
And I had taken typing, and I could type 80-something words a minute. And so my father has horrible handwriting, and he would handwrite his clients' tax returns, and then he would hand them to his 12-year-old daughter. If anyone's a former client, as far as I know, no one's been audited as a result of this activity. But I would type them on the typewriter. And I would charge him $12 a tax return.
Yes, you had steady clientele.
I had steady clientele in the house.
It's impressive.
And then it expanded. So my older brother...
Have you ever talked to him about his, like, how he experienced that when you started it?
I didn't. I should. You know what? I'm going to call him later and ask him about that.
It'd be fascinating to hear his take on it.
Yeah.
Because it was like your idea.
It was. And so I was just typing. I used to make copies for him too. So I would make copies because you had to have multiple copies of everything. So I would make copies. He had a copier in his office. And I would make copies and I would type on the typewriter. And then it was a word processor. And then eventually he got software. But my older brother was at VCU. And I would type papers for him and his friends. So we had a computer in the house. And I would type papers for him and his friends. Because everybody didn't have a computer at the time. You had the lab, and so they would write their papers, and I would type up college students' papers and charge them.
Man, I would totally still pay a kid for that. Like, I try to use voice to text for stuff because I'm better at talking thoughts than writing. And it gets it wrong, and I'm worried, and I get it.
And you're like, Yeah.
I would definitely pay a kid
to
sit there and
for
transcript.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was really my first.
Nice.
It was also my first business.
You were really entrepreneurial from the beginning, and for real.
But like I tell people all the time, I had no desire to, like as an adult, no desire to be an entrepreneur. I used to tell people all the time, because I call it entrepreneur, I guess you call it X now, but entrepreneurial Twitter drives me up a wall.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like everybody should be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, no.
Nope.
You need, like, entrepreneurs need people that work for them.
Yeah, that actually wouldn't work mathematically.
Exactly. And I was always like, I'll be the person that works for you. So I had no interest or desire
Do you have a name for that, by the way? I was just talking to someone who I've been doing a collaboration with them, and they're so clearly the person who can take the idea or vision, like run with it and bring it to life. And they're so good at that, but they could never like work for the man. Like they're not an employee type, but they're also not the person who starts something.
They're like, I don't know.
Because I read, the book, is it EOS? They call it like an integrator.
Yeah.
Or like a COO type.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's got to be a better word for that person who they're not necessarily, they wouldn't call themselves entrepreneur, but they're really good working with starting a new thing.
But they're not going to be the ones that. But we should come up with something.
We should come up with something.
We should totally. Give us like a week. I guarantee we'll come up with something.
And you can test it out at Blackstreet too. Like just start throwing it out there a lot. Next thing you know, people are using the word. And they're like, I never knew that was a word.
Either people will be like, what's that? And be like, oh, that's cool. Or they'll be like, girl, no.
Yeah.
We'll be totally mean girls. Like, stop trying to make fetch happen.
Oh, man. No, that's cool. So, okay, this is fascinating though, because you then, every time we talk, I learn new things about you.
There you go.
So you kind of started out entrepreneurial by nature. Then you went to totally non-entrepreneurial route.
So
and now have arced back to that.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know if I've talked to someone in terms of their career path where it was that sequence.
Yeah.
Okay, so just give a little more of your story then to listeners, because I do think it's helpful for them to hear the non-linear, zigzagging path.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go in depth, but what was your path?
So I'm not going to go in depth, but I am going to start at the same point that Rasheeda's Clerical Services started, because it's actually really important. Because I'm such a type A planner. 12 years old is the mark of, I launched Rasheeda's Clerical Services. I decided I wanted to go to Spelman and I wanted to be a lawyer. And everything from that point forward was geared towards those goals. All the way, went
according to plan.
And it went according to plan. I didn't apply to any other schools. Did I ever tell you this?
No.
I only applied to Spelman. And then I got to Spelman my freshman year, and I started looking at law schools. Like, I loved college. I had the best college experience, but I also was like, there's a plan.
Were your parents nervous that you only applied to one?
No. They knew their child very well. Like, I would get mad. I had an uncle who was like, well, what if you don't get in? And I got so mad at him. Like, how dare you even ask this question?
How dare you doubt me like that?
This is foolishness.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated from college, like, I went straight to Michigan.
Yep.
Went to law school. I knew I did the things, and then I got to my second year of law school, and I was like, I don't want to be at school anymore. Oh my God, help me.
That's like Ashley. She went for architecture first, and then she's like, what am I doing?
I was so tired. I was so burnt out, Steve. Like, it was so bad. And that's when I found out that we had an externship program. And so I took a semester and worked at the Children's Defense Fund in D.C. And my first day of work was September 10th, 2001. And I worked 2 blocks from Union Station and 4 blocks from the Capitol. So, like, that changed everything. I got back to school and was like, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save all the kids.
Yeah.
I was on a mergers and acquisitions track. Like, I was a total corporate lawyer. And I was like, no. I took all these social justice classes my last semester. And that was the point where I no longer knew what I was going to be doing. And so from there, I came back to Richmond. I clerked on the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. Decided to stay. I took the Georgia bar, but then decided to stay in Richmond. Okay. So I was licensed in Georgia and decided to stay here. Did some work temporarily and then ended up at Capital One.
But did you, in all that period, did you ever feel kind of confused and lost, or was it always like, all right, here's my next plan,
It was always, this is my next plan. So it wasn't until I took the job at Capital One, and I wasn't in legal. I was in procurement, but doing contract negotiations. So
still
lawyer.
Those skills, yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of hit this, like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Like, the plan has ended. I don't know what you're supposed to do. Life hasn't ended, but the plan has ended.
The last page of the plan.
And I was like,
you need Rasheeda's Clerical Services to jump in.
Clerical
Like, where's the paper? I need the next part of the deck.
I need the next pages. And so that was a major moment for me of just being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what I decided to do was I settled into the I don't know. And so I had a 15-year career at Capital One. I had, 4 or 5 jobs over that 15 years, right? You move every few years.
Yeah.
And none of them were things that I had planned to do. And I just learned to kind of go with gut instinct and go with the flow and be like, this fits right, this doesn't fit right. And that's kind of how I've flowed ever since. Is like, okay, this makes sense. This is the next move. I hit a point in 2009. So I graduated law school in 2002, passed the Georgia bar in 2002, did the Virginia bar in 2003.
Yeah.
Around 2009, I was like, I'm taking continuing legal education classes because you're supposed to. But like, I had taken PowerPoint for litigators.
Really?
Because I just didn't know what to take. Like, I was running out of stuff to take that was relevant to my day job. And so that was just, I was like, oh, I'll take a PowerPoint class, like whatever.
Yeah.
And that was you need to go figure out if you're going to be a lawyer or not. And it was hard. Because, everybody's got egos, but lawyers got like egos. And there's this whole, like, I spent these 3 years, law school is expensive.
Yeah.
If I don't continue practicing, like, what am I saying about myself? What will people think?
Oh, I've coached a few lawyers and have a couple of friends who all of them had that narrative from, like, in school, there's also a narrative driven into you.
Yeah.
And so now you're like deviating from that or not that identity.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And so I had to work through that because my thought process was I'll go inactive with the bar, right? If I go inactive, I don't have to take these dumb classes that I'm not actually getting any value out of anymore. And I can still keep my bar license, right? And so I was wrestling with that, but I had to work through the ego part. And then finally I was like, you are not going to go back and practice. Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And then I was able to settle into that. And so I've gone inactive. And I will never... I'm definitely on a never say never because every time I've said it, it's backfired on me. But I will not go back active in Georgia because I would have to catch up on all the CLEs since 2009. So that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe Virginia, but definitely not Georgia. But that's kind of been my path. I left in 2015. I left Capital One. I had no idea what I was going to do. I started an LLC just randomly.
Yeah.
But I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that my season at Capital One was over. And I kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship for myself again. And then I had been working with a couple other people and kind of stumbled into what is now JWC Foundation. But none of that was planned. Like, none of it was planned. And even with my business, how it has evolved over the past few years, it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
How it has evolved has been very organic.
Yeah.
And none of the things that I ever planned.
Have you had any people say like, "Oh yeah, but I saw this coming for you"?
People tell me that all the time.
Yeah, I get that a lot too, and I could see that for you.
Yeah.
I could also see people right now saying like, "Wow, it's a new Rasheeda. You're just going with the flow like this, like this is feels like a different approach for you."
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I've had some people say it too. It was like, "Oh yeah, we saw this coming." I'm like, "You did? How come you didn't tell me? It would have been nice to know."
But I feel like the people that are like, "We saw that coming," are also like, "We also knew that you wouldn't have listened to us if we had told you when we saw it." Yeah. And I'm always like, I mean, you might know me a little bit, but whatever.
I'm not going to listen to you saying that I'm not going to listen to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's funny. Me too.
Yeah.
I thought we should also chat about, we've kind of had this conversation going about like the post big corporate life.
Oh my gosh.
Both like detoxing and deconstruction and reconstruction.
Because there's a reconstruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I liked about our last chat on it is it's not just, I mean, I don't know. There's so many topics right now of people kind of detoxing or deconstructing, but it remains in that negative space.
Yeah.
I kind of I was energized by our conversation of the what's the reconstructing part and what are you trying to deconstruct toward?
Yeah.
I didn't look up yet if we can TM this. So corporate deconstruction. What's better, that or corporate detox?
I like corporate detox.
It sounds a little better, doesn't it?
It sounds like cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what was your experience coming out? Because I think we had similar but different.
Yeah. So I knew my role was ending. And so I had a lot of time to kind of prep for it.
Mm-hmm.
And my older brother is executive coach, and he said, "I can't coach you." I was like, "I would never ask you to do that." Because I could see like I would revert back to being the little kid that's like, "You're not the boss of me."
Yeah. It would be a scary thing to see yourself.
So annoying. But he did give me this advice, which is, and I know we've talked about this before, take a week for every year that you're at a company, if you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can afford to do that. If not, take as long as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And I had purposed to take at least 15 weeks. And that 15 weeks was about doing nothing. That was about, and my job was eliminated, so I was in redeployment. And so I had 90 days or 60 days, I don't know, some stretch of time before it was actually my last day. But the way that I had structured everything, that kicked in January of 2020. And so I had written up all of the year-end performance appraisals for my team in December. So I really had no work to do. And so I decided to start that 15 weeks in January.
Yeah.
And the only thing I committed to doing was walking my daughter to the bus stop and picking her up from school. That was it. I didn't want to commit to anything else.
I mean, did that freak you out at first, though?
A little bit nerve-wracking.
That still, to me, I just got off of a week where I turned everything off.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time I truly, truly did that.
Yeah.
Like not even picking up the phone kind of thing. And I actually really enjoyed it, but I think until now that really scared. That idea was like, no way.
Like you can just disconnect? What?
Well, like, and I'm just going to question my whole identity because being busy is so much a part of my life.
It's the thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing.
And I was scared of what's going to pop up in that.
Well, and I have an inability to sit still. Like I'll give you this. So every night I watch one episode of Suits. I've just started watching Suits.
Yeah, me too.
I hate lawyer shows and I am obsessed with this show.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, like, I love this show. I can see my friends in this show. Like, I'm looking at them like, that's so-and-so. That's so-and-so. And, like, I just love it. And so, but I've never actually sat and physically looked at an entire episode.
Okay.
I'm always playing some mind game on my phone or doing something else, right? It's kind of part of my decompression.
Yeah.
To the point that I now am like, put the phone over there and see if you can just sit and watch this. Because there's this guilt of like, I should be productive. Yeah. I should be doing something. And that's kind of what comes with that detox, right? That first step of let me just shut it down. I didn't realize how much of my day was filled with meetings, but filled all the time. And so I stopped using an alarm clock at the end of 2019. I still don't use an alarm clock.
Same here.
It is the best thing in the world.
It's amazing.
And I naturally wake up at what other people would consider to be ungodly hours. Like I naturally wake up between 5:30 and 5:45 at the latest.
Yeah.
I have an alarm with air quotes of my nightstand light I'm a smart home person.
Yeah.
My nightstand light automatically comes on at 6:15 as a backup.
Yeah. But also that is more natural. Like the sun, this is one of, here we go. There's so many things in the corporate detox. Oh my God. Okay. But one of the things I was realizing was what is it called? Circadian rhythm, like the natural. Yes. So for example, right now it started getting darker earlier. Winter is longer night. Summer is shorter night. There's reasons for some of that, and there's things that matter about that. But then, the invention of the light bulb, and that's gone.
Exactly.
I have realized even though your light comes on and you're like, maybe that's a cheat. No, because actually the sun coming up slowly, gradually is a thing.
Yeah.
We're not meant to wake up like,
like jolting, like, oh my gosh.
And I realized that was part of my stress in my corporate life, where I woke up to that feeling, and then it set the tone of the day
for the whole day versus like feeling. I can ease into my day.
Into it. Yeah.
And I wake my daughter up the same way. Her lamp in her room eases up in the morning, and she knows that means it's time to get up, and it eases down at night till it's off, and she knows that it's bedtime.
Oh yeah.
Now.
See, but I need to have you over and make my home more smart. I'm still manual. I go around at night every hour. I'm dimming the lights down a little more and a little more. Everyone's looking at me like, Steve, you need to get a light.
This is your Philips Hue light bulbs. They're like the smart light bulbs, but they last like 4 years or something crazy.
Yeah.
And it has a hub, and it's just an app, and you can just program it.
Okay. I just recently heard about these.
I love them.
That's great, because I have a friend who like rewired his whole house. And so I'm always thinking like that's the route you have to go.
Just buy the light bulbs.
Because there's ones out for outdoor too that the bulbs turn themselves on and off.
I actually use the regular bulbs for my porch lights too.
Oh, okay.
And they come on and off at dusk and dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that's I think there were, for me, a lot of things in that realm of like health and wellness that came in the detox.
Yeah.
Where, similar to you, because I took a break of, pausing and not rushing into the next thing.
Yeah.
It allowed me to not rush back into the old habits.
Yeah.
And have time to not just shift habits, but notice.
And see how you feel with it.
Yeah.
Which is critical. And so I took that at the beginning of 2020. My last official day of work was March 9th, 2020. Everything shut down on March 12th for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the luxury of having 3 months of clear brain space to myself, followed by everybody in isolation. So I'm home with a then 5-year-old, figuring out kind of how we navigate through that. But at a time that everyone else is also figuring out life and re-examining things.
Yeah.
And so I got this extended period of like, how are things going? And even there's just been little things. Like even this year, I was looking at my calendar. I was trying to schedule a lunch with somebody today. And I looked at my calendar and I was like, I got next Friday or I have after Thanksgiving. And I went, how did I get back here? Right. And so, and it's not so much, I realized though, it's not so much that my calendar is filled. It is that I protect certain blocks of time so ferociously that it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
These days are protected for these things. So it's not I am back to back to back.
Well, that was another realization I had, because in that whole noticing what life had been, noticing what I need or want to change, I noticed, of course, my days were always packed. The calendar was always packed. And what I did was, if there was ever open space, I'd be like, sure, go ahead and have it. Because I was trying to be, I don't know, helpful people pleaser. I don't know what, but I've also gotten really strict about like keeping blocks open. And I find myself, the old habit creeps back in, where that thing in your head is like, oh, but I've got that space. I could just give it to you. We could schedule it then. And then the other voice is like, no, protect that time. And it was that detox time where I realized protecting those blocks of time is actually, I don't know, super important.
Yeah.
Because I'll fill them in so easily thinking, oh, there's open space. But then to your point, you're back to overwhelmed burnout land so fast. And it's like hard to get out of that.
Well, and then when you fill that time during the day, you don't have time to do the stuff, right? To execute. And execution, I think at different stages looks different, right? There's a period of life early in my career where execution literally looks like doing. And now execution looks more like directing and less doing. I don't want to do anymore. I have no interest in doing. I'm completely interested in helping people figure out how they do. But I don't want to do. Right? I that's just not where I am anymore. And the things that I do need to do, if you would, they take me a couple hours. Like they're not taking me all day, but I need the couple of hours to get them done.
Were there any other big like things that stand out in your kind of detoxing?
There are habits, and I know you definitely appreciate this. Building decks, and how you get. There are things and tools that I learned that were very helpful, and there are also things that can cause overkill. And being able to figure out which of those things I wanted to carry forward and which things I was like, please don't ever take that with you anywhere. Like just leave it where it is. Those were some key like ahas for me.
One of my favorite things still this day, and whatever, this is going to piss some people off who aren't in a place to do this right now, but like, I just don't have to spend all day trying to convince people that we should do a thing that we all know we should do. We just go do it.
Just go do it.
Or we don't like talk about talking about it. We just like go try it. That to me, that's like one of the most satisfying things of the shift.
I love it because then you're like, I can just go.
And you learn so much faster than trying to like plan it to perfection.
Exactly.
There's still planning, but I've never asked you, but you do a lot of teaching people, like educating, also coaching people, working a lot with Black entrepreneurs to help them make their business successful around finance, like personal finance, budgeting and stuff. And I've been playing with different names for you just in my head of like budgeting that doesn't suck. And like, I think you have a way that's just really relaxed and personable and like realistic. Whereas a lot of financial gurus, it's like the opposite of that. Was that tied at all to your, the corporate detoxing stuff? Was any of the working on finance related to that?
It came right before that.
Okay.
So I think it was all a natural progression. I went through like this messy divorce and I wanted to get a better handle on my finances as I was going through that process. And so it came from my own experience of wanting to take control of my finances and look at things through a different lens and not look at them through a very traditional lens. And then, but had I not done those things, I couldn't have left. Right? I wouldn't have been debt free. I wouldn't have been and I don't think you have to be debt free in order to make those changes, but I definitely wouldn't have been in the mind space to be able to make tough decisions, but like life-changing decisions. So money stress takes away your free brain space, which takes away your creativity, which limits what you can see, and that keeps you kind of in a box instead of opening the box up and being able to just sort of flow. And that's like my core belief behind that. So it's the same principle of the detox, right? Like take away the stressors and open up the possibilities and then figure out what fits and what doesn't.
That's really cool. Like, what's your approach? Can you give us do you have like a approach to budgeting that you?
So I use a tool. I use YNAB. It stands for You Need a Budget, but they go by YNAB now. Shocker. It's very, very, very confusing name. But so one, I like the tool. But two, my thing is spend money on the things that you really care about and don't spend money on the stuff you don't really care about. Ramit Sethi, who's an author I like to follow, likes to say, cut mercilessly on the things that don't matter and spend extravagantly on the things that do.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's the same concept. But my other approach, especially with coaching, is there's no judgment. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about how many cards you have or what you spend your money on, because those are personal choices. And if those are things that the spending of the money doesn't stress you out and you're okay with, go for it. Let's just figure out how to make it work, right? If you're spending the money and the fact that you spent the money on that thing is stressing you out, that doesn't align with your core values. And people should have money values that are, these are the things I really care about. I care about experiences more than I care about things. So I'm going to spend money on experiences more than I'm going to spend money on things.
Yeah. That's cool. I love the extravagance part too, because even the word budget almost assumes that it's like stingy.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I was talking to my daughter about that the other day. Like, no, actually, this allows you to take this amount of money and do whatever you like, be extravagant with it, because you know, like you've taken care of the other buckets.
Exactly, the basics are taken care of. Let's go have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could dive more into that. Maybe you come back on later.
I would love to come back.
Okay.
Yeah,
because we will definitely talk about. And right now the offer is open if people want to get help in that space.
Yep.
I think you're a great coach for that.
Hit me up.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Anytime.
We're like really trying not to spend another hour talking.
Y'all don't want to do what we do, which is we spend 3 or 4 hours talking.